When Manley P. Hall published The Secret Teaching of All Ages in 1928, he was only 27 years old. Yet what he created wasn't just a book. It was a map of the world's wisdom traditions. Hall believed that beneath all religions, philosophies, and myths, there exists one single truth, a perennial wisdom that has guided humanity since the beginning of civilization. Now, Hall called that wisdom the secret teachings, not because it was hidden to keep people out, but because it must be discovered through understanding. Truth, he said, can't be handed to you. You have to grow into it. And today we're going to kind of walk through those teachings in simple terms. We'll look at kind of what Hall taught about the mystery schools, the symbolism, the alchemy, and the inner path to wisdom. And everything that we are going to go over comes directly from the principles that he laid out in that book, using his own words where I see fit, but hopefully explained in a way that anyone can follow. So Hall believed that humanity has always been guided by one eternal philosophy, what ancient writers called the perennial wisdom, or Prisca Theologia, the first theology. It is the idea that every religion, Egyptian, Greek, Hindu, Christian, or native, is a different branch of the same tree. He wrote that truth is not newly born. It is merely forgotten and then remembered again. Every few centuries, a teacher appears, Hermes, Krishna, Pythagoras, Buddha, Christ, to remind humanity of what it already knows deep down, and that is that all life is one, and that every person carries a spark of the divine within. In the simplest terms, Hall taught that truth doesn't belong to any one faith. It is woven through all of them like a golden thread through cloth. The names change, but the principles stay the same. Live wisely, act kindly, seek understanding, and remember that the divine is within you, not somewhere else. To understand how this wisdom was preserved, Hall turned to the mystery schools themselves, which were ancient centers of learning that were found in Egypt and Greece and Persia and India. He described them as universities for the soul. The mysteries weren't secret cults. They were schools of transformation. They taught mathematics, astronomy, ethics, and symbolism, but their real purpose was to awaken consciousness. An initiate in Greece or Egypt went through years of preparation before being shown the deeper truths about life, death, and even rebirth. And Hall summarized the mysteries in 3 stages. First was purification, cleansing the body and the mind through study and discipline. The second being illumination, learning the symbolic language of nature. And the third being union, realizing that unity with the divine source. These stages can still be applied today. Purification means letting go of selfish motives. Illumination means learning to see the meaning behind experiences. And union means living in harmony with the higher laws of life. To Hall, the mystery schools proved that the search for truth has always been organized, intentional, and compassionate. Their teachers were philosophers, priests, and scientists in one. What we might now call holistic educators of the soul. If there's one concept that Hall is best known for, it is that truth was written in symbols. He wrote, "The universe is a great book written in symbols, and those who can read it are truly wise." Now, in ancient times, teachers used stories, emblems, and geometric shapes to express truths that words could not hold. The serpent represented wisdom because it shed its skin. The rose symbolized unfolding consciousness. The cross marked the meaning of spirit and matter. Symbols were multi-layered. They taught moral lessons to beginners and cosmic truths to initiates. For example, the story of Hercules wasn't just about strength. It was about the soul overcoming lower instincts. The myth of Isis and Osiris wasn't just a tale of gods. It was a lesson about death and resurrection. The same principle echoed later in Christianity. And Hall often warned that when we lose our symbolic literacy, we lose contact with meaning. And I think that's pretty powerful. Modern people take stories literally or they discard them altogether. But the ancients understood that a myth was a form of higher science, a way of explaining spiritual process through imagery. He encouraged readers to look at life itself symbolically, the seasons as symbols of growth, decay, and renewal, the elements, earth, air, fire, water, as states of consciousness, and geometry as the overall blueprint of creation. Now, in Hall's teachings, symbolism is the forgotten language of the soul. Once you learn to read it, everything becomes a classroom. It's just how he wrote. A central idea that repeated throughout Hall's work is the ancient axiom, as above, so below. This phrase was taken from the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus, meaning that the same laws that govern the smallest atom and the largest galaxy are one and the same. Man is a miniature universe, a microism, reflecting the larger cosmos in structure and in spirit. Hull kind of explained it like this. Every part of nature mirrors the whole. Our heart beats as planets orbit, and our thoughts rise and fall in patterns resembling the tides. When we understand this connection, we realize that we are participants in creation and not outsiders observing it. And a lot of what I just said relates to the Riddle of the Universe book as well. Very much the same theories. Now, these principles give geometry and astrology and even human ethics a kind of sacred dimension. To act in harmony with universal law is to live in rhythm with the cosmos. And that is why the ancient temples were aligned with stars and why philosophers' goal was inner harmony. Both mirror the same order. Hall taught that life is a school for the soul. We are not here by accident, but to learn, to grow, and to remember who we are. The soul, he explained, descends into matter for the purpose of experience and then ascends again, enriched by that experience. And this echoes the Egyptian myth of Osiris, the Greek story of Persephone, and the Christian parable of the prodigal son, all describing consciousness leaving the source and returning wiser. Now, for Hall, death is not an end, but a transformation. He compared it to changing garments or crossing a threshold. Very similar to how the caterpillar becomes a butterfly. The soul sheds its physical body and continues on a higher plane. He called it the great cycle of descent and return. Now, understanding this kind of removes fear and gives life some sort of direction. In every experience, joy, pain, success, or even failure, that's part of your education as a soul. Basically, nothing that we go through is wasted. Every moment becomes meaningful when you think about it this way, and every difficulty becomes an opportunity for refinement. He devoted entire chapters to alchemy, the medieval art of transmutation. He reminded us that real alchemy isn't about turning lead into gold. It is about transforming the human self. The base metal is ignorance. The philosopher's stone is wisdom. He wrote that the true alchemist is the one who turns the dross of experience into the gold of enlightenment. Now, in the old text, the alchemist's laboratory and furnaces were metaphors for inner work. The fire represented desire that was purified by discipline, and the vessels themselves symbolized the body and the mind. The elixir was awakened consciousness. He just simply simplified the great work of alchemy into 3 stages that parallel spiritual growth. The first being blackening, nigredo, facing ignorance and shadow, whitening, which is albedo, which is purification and insight, and reddening, which is rubedo, illumination and integration. He pointed out that these stages appear in myths everywhere. The night before dawn, death before rebirth, descent before ascent. Alchemy simply gave them a scientific language. The goal overall, he said, is to become the living philosopher's stone, someone whose presence brings understanding and peace because they embody balance between the earthly and the divine. Now, he wrote on a lot on transformation, not belief. He often stressed that the mysteries were never about belief. They were about experience. A person could memorize every doctrine and still remain untransformed. The real secret, he said, is not hidden in temples or in books. It is hidden within ourselves. He wrote that the path of wisdom is the path of self-mastery. And that means learning to govern our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions, basically in harmony with higher law. When the lower nature, the reactive, the selfish, the fearful part of us is tamed, the higher nature can shine through more naturally. And he compared this inner work to the construction of a temple. Each good deed is a stone, each truth being a pillar, and each realization is a window letting in more light. In that way, the human being kind of becomes a living sanctuary. The same teaching was echoed by St. Paul when he wrote, "You are the temple of God." For Hall, self-mastery was the real initiation, and life itself was the initiator. Now, another major teaching of Hall that he emphasized was the unity of knowledge. In ancient times, there was no divide between science and art and spirituality. Geometry and music and astronomy were all seen as expressions of divine order. The builder, the musician, and the philosopher were all studying the same truth, just through different senses. He lamented that the modern civilization had split these branches apart. Religion without reason became superstition, and science without spirituality became soulless. His goal was to reunite them in his book. He explained that the laws of nature are the laws of God. To study them is to worship. To create art that reflects balance and beauty is also prayer. And to serve humanity with compassion is the highest ritual of all. That is my favorite. And that perspective turns everyday life into sacred practice. Teaching, healing, building, even honest labor all becomes acts of alignment with universal order. The role of the teacher and the student, Hall often referenced, is that every age wisdom appears through those ready to teach it. When he talked about the role of the teacher and the student, he often said that in every age, wisdom reappears through those ready to teach it, but also through those ready to listen. He compared humanity's spiritual evolution to school. Each generation graduates a little higher than the last. Teachers, he wrote, are the custodians of the eternal flame. They don't own truth, they protect it and they pass it on. Students, in turn, must approach it with humility and patience, not looking for a quick answer, but for understanding that it transforms character. So basically what I'm telling you here doesn't replace you actually going and reading this book and making your own meaning from his words. And in that way, wisdom remains living. It's not frozen in dogma, but growing as humanity grows. The way I explain something may be different than the way you perceive something. So he said that each man is the custodian of the eternal flame. In keeping it bright, he serves the gods. That means that every person who learns something true and lives it keeps the ancient light burning. The final part of Hall's teaching is what he called the path of the adept, the journey from learning about truth to actually living it. And he explained that there are 3 main stages to spiritual growth. The first is knowledge, gathering information, studying, comparing, and analyzing. The second is understanding, where you see the connections and meanings behind the facts. And 3 is wisdom, which is applying that understanding with compassion and integrity. And many people stop at the knowledge part, he said. And they think that they are wise. But knowledge begins only when knowledge changes our behavior. So you can read all you want, but if you're not living what you believe in what you read, it means nothing. It is of the mind that understanding is of the heart. The adept, in his view, is not someone who performs miracles, but someone who lives in harmony with universal law. They don't withdraw from the world, they serve it. They embody the principle of balance, of stillness and motion, of detachment with compassion, and of strength without pride. Hall compared the adept to a lamp. It doesn't argue about light, it simply shines. And in 1928, Hall predicted that the mysteries would eventually return in new form. He also wrote that when religion, science, and art are understood as one expression of truth, the mysteries shall live again. He didn't mean sacred lodges or secret lodges or rituals. He meant a change in consciousness. And that prophecy feels especially relevant today as more people explore mindfulness and symbolism and philosophy and holistic science. The ancient desire to reconnect with meaning is resurfacing. And Hall would say the world is preparing for a new stage of initiation, not through temples of stone, but through awakened minds. He believed that the future mystery school would be life itself. Every experience, every relationship, every discovery would become a lesson in the great classroom of existence. And in that sense, humanity as a whole is still walking the initiatory path, one that leads from ignorance to illumination. For all his deep philosophy, he always brought the teachings kind of back to practical life. He said that philosophy is the science of right living. If study doesn't make you kinder, calmer, or more useful, it hasn't done its job. And I love that. He encouraged readers to begin where they are. Study something that uplifts your mind. Practice quiet reflection each day. Choose honesty even when it is difficult. And see others as fellow students rather than opponents. He reminds us that the first temple of the mysteries is the human heart. Compassion and curiosity are the 2 pillars that support it. And when you read Hall's words, it's easy to forget that they were written almost a century ago. He spoke of unity and humility and enlightenment in a way that just feels timeless. His main message can be summed up in a few simple truths. All life is connected. Every religion points to the same center. Symbols are the language of the soul. The purpose of life is growing through understanding. Wisdom is service, not superiority. And to Hall, every person is both student and teacher, both initiate and initiator. We all carry a spark of that eternal flame within us, the light of consciousness that can never be extinguished. He urged his readers to protect that light through study, through reflection, and through good works, because he said, the light once revealed cannot be extinguished. It only waits for eyes to see. So when we strip away the layers of philosophy and symbolism, what Hall wanted most was to remind us of something very simple. We are divine beings learning how to remember. He taught that same intelligence that built galaxies also beat within the human heart. That wisdom begins when we live it as if that's true. Whether you study geometry or religion or art or science, every path can lead to the same summit, the direct experience of unity. That was the real secret teaching, not something that was hidden in books, but something revealed in the way that you live. He wrote that wisdom is not the revelation of the order of life. To see that order is enlightenment. To live by its is peace. So when we look at the symbols, the myths, and the philosophies that Hall wrote about, we're not just studying the history, we're studying ourselves, our own potential to become wise, compassionate, and awake. And that is the heart of the secret teaching of all ages. It's not ancient history, it's a living roadmap. From ignorance to understanding, from complexity back to simplicity, from the outer world to the light within. And as Hall himself said, the greatest of all mysteries is life itself, and to live it wisely is the highest initiation.